And with that, could we have a roll call, please?
Call. Commissioner Jackson Paul,
Here.
Commissioner Medina Atchison,
Here.
Commissioner Peter Creel,
Here.
Treasurer Sherry Budd, Commissioner Jeff Jar,
Here.
Bernard Grant, and Chair Brian Cullen.
Here.
Complete.
With that, we have an agenda before us. Could I have an action on the agenda, please?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting on March 12th.
Agenda,
2025.
excuse
Oh,
me,
sorry.
Commissioner, it's agenda.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
We have a motion to approve the agenda as presented and supported. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Also presented for us are the minutes from the regular meeting of March 12th, 2025. Do we have an action on that?
Now I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of March 12th, 2025.
I support that motion too.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of March 12th, 2025, and a support. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving onward, no correspondence or announcements at this point. We have a public hearing before us, in fact, two of them. So the first one is case 25-004, Crossroads Distribution Center North rezoning. It is a request by Crossroads North Distribution Center North LLC to rezone the following properties. And they are the properties as presented in the agenda. The parcel location are between Ecorse Road and Van Buren Road, west of Haggerty Road. Do I have an action concerning opening the public hearing?
Through the chair, make a motion to open public hearing.
Support.
Motion to open the public hearing and support. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? The public hearing is open. Do we have any comments from the public? Any comments from the public? Any from the public? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Through the
Chair, make a motion to close.
support.
A motion and support to close the public hearing. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, public hearing, item number 2, non-residential planned unit development, PUD amendment. Article 6, supplemental zoning district standards, Chapter 5, planned unit developments, commercial, office, and industrial. So do I have an action concerning opening the public hearing?
Through the chair. I move to open the public hearing on the non-residential plan unit development amendment.
Support.
Motion and support to open the public hearing. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Public hearing is open. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment? Anyone from the public that would like to make a comment? And finally, anyone from the public? With that, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close public hearing on the supplemental zoning amendment.
Motion and support to close the public hearing. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed. Okay, no old business. New business. Item number 1, case 25004, Crossroads Distribution Center North rezoning. A request by Crossroads Distribution Center North LLC to rezone the following properties. And those are the properties as listed in the agenda. And there are 12 of them. Location of the parcels are between Ecorse Road and Van Born Road, west of Haggerty Road. First off, presentation by the township staff. Director Akers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will turn the presentation over to our township planner, Vidya Christian.
Thank you, Director Akers, members of the commission. The request before you tonight is from Ashley Capital, Crossroads North, for rezoning of a total of 12 parcels that are located on the west side of Haggerty Road, south of Van Born, from a designation of R1B, single-family residential, to M1 and MT designation. M1 is light industrial designation, and MT is industrial transportation designation. This is Ashley's ongoing process of consolidating many of the smaller parcels that have been in their ownership into a single industrial zoning designation to consolidate with the Crossroads North Distribution Center property that they own in this area. The zoning ordinance has got specific standards based upon which we review every request for rezoning. I shall summarize those standards in brief. If you look at your review letter, it basically has an itemized list of the tax parcel ID for each one of those 15 parcels. The fact that their current zoning designation is R1B, except for one parcel which currently is split zone designated, with the rear portion of the parcel being MT, industrial transportation, and the acreage of the parcels. Some of the parcels are as small as 0.49 acres, and they go all the way up to 4.71 acres in size. So based on the standards, the first one is whether the requested rezoning is consistent with the policies, objectives of the master plan and any sub-area plans. The applicant does not have any proposal for development of the parcels at this time. The rezoning of the parcels is basically allowing the applicant to consolidate these parcels into a single grouping of parcels consistent with what they already have. All of the rezoning of these parcels is changing their designation from residential to industrial. This area is designated on the master plan for either light industrial, industrial trucking, or for commercial at the corner of Ecorse and Haggerty. So at this time, the applicant's request for the specific parcels that they have noted for rezoning is consistent with the master plan as written. Is the request consistent with the basic intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance? The intent of the zoning ordinance basically is to impose regulations on projects to ensure that the design of the projects protects public health, safety, and welfare, and the design of the projects is such that it contributes to the community. To that end, the ordinance has got provisions for site design, which will be reviewed at such time when Ashley comes up with a site plan when they intend to build something on this parcel. At this time, they are just rezoning the parcels. The intention of the M1 zoning district is basically to act as a transition between heavier industrial uses and the adjacent non-industrial uses and the public rights of way. When the individual parcels are combined with the adjacent parcels under the applicant's control, and when and if these parcels are redeveloped, they will likely serve for smaller scale light industrial uses. Because these parcels are much smaller in size, they are not going to typically be able to accommodate the typical distribution center buildings. They will be much smaller scale light industrial uses. The third criteria is whether the capability of a street system can accommodate the expected traffic generated by the uses permitted in the requested zoning district. Many of these parcels front onto Van Born Road. Now, Van Born Road contains one lane running east and two lanes running west across the length of the property, that is Crossroads North, which widens into 5 lanes at the intersection with Haggerty, and eventually it tapers down to a 2-lane road in both directions. Now, Haggerty Road is currently under a major reconstruction, and that major reconstruction is based upon years' worth of effort from the township and from the applicant working with the county, and it involves installation of full infrastructure and full road resurfacing along the entire stretch from Van Born and Haggerty intersection all the way up to Ecorse Road. And part of that improvement involves the installation of a traffic light. As the Planning Commission is aware, when Crossroads 8 and 9, buildings 8 and 9 were approved, where the junction of those buildings intersected with Haggerty Road, a new traffic light signal was approved at that. So when these parcels are in future developed, any traffic plan for that area will be reviewed to ensure that the traffic patterns are maintained so that additional curb cuts are not put onto Haggerty Road, and the traffic, there is an access management system in place for all of them to direct traffic appropriately. The next criteria is whether the township's utilities and services are adequate to accommodate uses permitted in this area. At this time, there is no construction of any building involved. At such time, when they do plan, we will have the township engineers and the DPW department review it, and any utility upgrades that are required will need to be made. Where any conditions, that conditions have changed since the zoning ordinance was adopted, or was there an error in the zoning ordinance that justifies the amendment? There are no errors in the zoning ordinance. This is merely the applicant trying to do a rezoning to be consistent with what the master plan is recommending. The proposed amendment is not going to result in exclusionary zoning, which is the next criteria. Exclusionary zoning basically means you're not doing a rezoning in order to exclude a specific use from the community itself. There are lots of parcels within the township that are zoned R1B, which allow for single-family residential uses. There are also lots of parcels in the community zoned M1 light industrial. So in either case, there is no exclusionary zoning involved with this proposal. If the rezoning is requested, whether it is compatible with the natural features of the property itself. We took a brief look at Eagle's Wetland Maps Viewer. There are a few wetland areas, that is hydric soils within this area. However, according to FEMA, there are no floodplains on this site. When the applicant is very familiar working with Eagle on their other projects, so at such time when they develop this project, we will make them go through the whole process again. And if there are any wetlands, they will have to do what they have to do on all their other projects. With regard to the potential uses permitted, the M1 allows a whole bunch of permitted uses and special land uses. Typically, any light industrial uses are principal permitted uses. There are a limited number of uses that are permitted as a special land use. When they apply for a use, we shall review it for consistency. If a rezoning is requested, are the boundaries of this rezoning reasonable in terms of the surrounding zoning district? If you look at the overall zoning map for the township, the Haggerty Road corridor, even on the east side, is all filled with light industrial uses. You have L&W Engineering, you have Ricardo. It's all industrial uses on the east side, and with the distribution centers and Crossroads North, that whole corridor is industrial. And that is the reason why when the master plan was written, this particular corridor with its access to I-275 and subsequent access to I-94, this was designated as a trucking route and corridor. So to that extent, the rezoning that is requested is consistent with what was planned for this area, and the boundaries are also consistent. If the rezoning is requested, is the zoning district better, or is some other zoning district would be more appropriate? That is the standard. Based on the location of the parcels surrounded by multiple M1 and MT zoned parcels, the proposed M1 would be the most appropriate zoning district in order to create contiguous zoning districts and not isolated parcels. The next criteria, because the specific use is industrial in nature, we would not recommend amending the R1B to allow for industrial uses. It is more appropriate to actually rezone the parcel to M1 itself. Rezoning of this parcel is not going to create an isolated neighborhood that is being surrounded by industrial uses either. Based upon a review of our proposal for the standards that are listed in the ordinance, it is our recommendation that the Planning Commission recommend to the Township Board of Trustees rezoning of the 15 lots that are listed on our review letter and in the Township's Planning Commission agenda for tonight, from R1B and MT to M1 light industrial designation, subject to compliance with the standards that are listed in section 12.504 A through L of the zoning ordinance. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Director Akers, do you have anything else?
No, sir, I have nothing to add.
Okay, do we have a presentation by the applicant?
Don't have anything to put up on the TV or anything, but my name's Dennis Schultz. I'm with Ashley Capital. I'm a project manager on the construction side. We're just looking to get the rest of the lots rezoned to what the master plan says. Any questions for me?
Okay, thank you. Commissioners? Comments, questions?
Seems consistent with previous actions.
Yep, and you're looking to bring all, that whole area into the same zoning, is that correct? Is that what
Correct.
I'm hoping to?
Yes.
Okay. With that, do we have anybody from the public with any comments? Any comments from the public? Comments from the public? Okay. Commissioners, do we have an action on this?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Jar.
I move to recommend that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the requested amendment to the zoning map to rezone the subject parcels from R1B and MT to M1 designation as described in the McKenna report dated March 12th, 2025 to the Township Board of Trustees.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Jar, supported by Commissioner Creel. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Roll call vote begin. Commissioner Medina Atchison? Yes. Creel?
Yes.
Treasurer Sherry Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson Paul?
Yeah, yes.
Commissioner Jeff Jar?
Yes.
Chair Brian Cullen?
Yes.
Roll call complete.
We're going to send that to the Board of Trustees for you. You're welcome. Okay, item number 2, case 23-049, Tractor Supply, southeast corner of Sumter Hall Road, final site plan review. A request by applicant CBE LLC, Brian Liebrandt, on behalf of Tractor Supply to construct a 22,407 square foot retail building, parking, landscaping, and affiliated site improvements. The site is located at the southeast corner of Sumter Road and Hull Road. The area affected by this request is approximately 5.40 acres of property. We first have a presentation by the township staff, Director Akers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I will sign the presentation to our township planner, Vidya Christian.
Thank you, Director Akers. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. As was summarized, the request before you tonight is from Brian Liebrandt to construct a Tractor Supply store, including a 22,407 square foot building, which includes a 20,000 square foot garden center, a 6,720 square foot outdoor display area. The development is located on a 5.4 acre site at the southeast corner of Sumter and Hull Roads. The site was previously zoned Agricultural and Estates District. The applicant was granted a request to rezone the property to SRMDU, which is the Sumter Road Mixed Use District, by the Board of Trustees on June 18th, 2024. This property also falls into the SROD, which was recently approved and adopted by the township, which is the Sumter Road Overlay District, which carries much higher standards of building design and pedestrian amenities. So the applicant appeared before you for preliminary site plan approval on May 22nd, 2024, at which time you also made a recommendation for special land use approval. The applicant has since then been working with a lot of entities, including Wayne County, to get their other approvals, which is why it has taken a little time for them to reappear before you for final site plan approval, but they are here, so hopefully from here on, the pathway is smoother. Some of the conditions that the Planning Commission had placed on them for prior approval is Planning Commission and Board of Trustees approval of rezoning from Ag to SRMU. As I mentioned, this was done in June 18th, 2024. Planning Commission and Board of Trustees approval of the special land use. This was granted on July 2nd of 2024. There was, if you recollect, when the site plan was shown along the east property line, there was a land area shown as optional. Now, the reason why we had a concern about this was some of the landscaping was shown on this area marked optional. Our comment was if required landscaping is being shown in this area, it can no longer be optional. It must be part of the site. It's no longer optional. So the applicant was working out the details of it. So we revised legal description and survey drawings are included as part of the draft easement documents. The optional land has now been included as part of parcel A with various easements being granted over the adjoining parcel B and the remainder of Wilkins' property. Wilkins is the original owner of the property from which this property was drawn. So, and there was some drain easement conveyance also. There is a lot of easements placed on this property because of a drain taking of some of the property. We noted some corrections that needed to be made on the easement documents. Since our review letter was done, the applicant has already made these corrections. I've not had a chance to double check them, but I do intend to fully check them, and I believe the applicant has met them, but I will double verify them. So at this time, I believe that requirement has been met. The next condition was all easements, including cross-access, dedications, and parcel reconfigurations submitted to the township in recordable format. As I mentioned, once I verify that all of the corrections have been made, just terminology, sometimes it was referred to as parent parcel, sometimes it was referred to as Wilkins parcel. You need to be consistent in the same terms. So once I verify that, we will ensure that all the right-of-way dedications, all the documents, which I want to make sure are consistent with the township's engineer too, they are then developed in a recordable format. We'll have the township attorney take a quick look at it, and then the applicant can record it and just give us a copy so we can file it off with the township's paperwork. Some correction was required on the site plan sheets to verify that the proposed building height is within the maximum limits permitted by the ordinance, which is 30 feet or 2 stories. The applicant has confirmed that. The Planning Commission had requested a trash truck circulation plan. That circulation plan has been provided and is functional. The Planning Commission approved a modification of the parking standard based on satisfactory evidence, and the applicant did show that the parking that they are providing is more than adequate to meet their needs based upon data from other Tractor Supply facilities. The striping of RV parking spaces. This is a kind of facility where people do come in with trailers in the back so they can haul bigger stuff. So they have 3 parking spaces shown on the south side of the property. We wanted to make sure somebody with a pickup truck doesn't come and park over there, now leaving no space for somebody with a trailer to park. So the applicant is going to paint those spaces as RV/trailer parking spaces only so that somebody with a car doesn't try to block those spaces. So that condition has been met. The original landscape plan had elms on them, which we do not permit within the township. They have swapped that tree out. Some of the landscape islands did not meet the minimum size requirement, and the Planning Commission looked at where those islands were and were okay with some of the islands being made smaller based upon the circulation plan. If you look at the overall landscape plan, there are over 100 trees and 400 shrubs that are going to be planted on the site to enhance it. So overall, it's going to be a very attractive site when it is completed. There are revisions to the photometric plan. The applicant has demonstrated compliance with the illumination standards of the zoning ordinance. The 12th condition was provision of dumpster enclosure and gates in conformance to ordinance standards, and that has been provided at this time. The monument sign at the northwest corner at the street intersection was shown located within 10 feet of the property line. It must be a minimum of 10 feet, which is correctly shown on the site plan, but then there is a separate sign exhibit from their sign company, which has got a very strange dimension noted on it, which I have no idea what they measured from. So for purposes of this review, I have disregarded their sign company's submission. I will go with the sign company submitted by the applicant's engineering firm as being the correct dimension, and I will disregard the sign company submission. Approval of building materials. The applicant submitted it during original site plan approval, and the Planning Commission approved all the materials. I want to reiterate to the applicant, please do not switch any building materials, colors without prior approval, or you will be made to take everything out and replace it. We do not want you to have to do that. Please do not swap out anything. Finally, approval of stormwater detention system, which I believe was the item that took the applicant the longest time to work out with the county. At this time, this condition has been met. I will let Mike go over that and summarize the engineering. Based on our review of the plans at this time, we believe Tractor Supply has met all of the Planning Commission's requirements. Our recommendation is that the Planning Commission grant final site plan approval to Tractor Supply Company for the construction of the new facility at the southeast corner of Hull and Sumter Roads, subject to our final verification of all of the easement documents and their recording prior to the issuance of building permits. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lepick?
Thank you. Fishbeck's reviewed Tractor Supply's final site plan dated February 19th, 2025, submitted to the township for final site plan approval. We conducted a full engineering review of the plans, and our comments are below. In general, on the cover sheet, a list of required permits needs to be shown on the cover sheet. The applicant is responsible for acquiring all the necessary permits and submitting the approval documents to the township for record. The new building work includes a water main service as well as a sanitary service. Those two services include connections to mains within the Sumter and Hull Road right-of-way, which will require a Wayne County permit. Excuse me. For stormwater management, as Vidya alluded, there's been quite a bit of work with the county to provide proper stormwater management plan as well as an outlet. They've constructed a pretty long ditch area that outlets to a county drain a little south east of their property, I believe. For township stormwater comments, we commented on the cover of some of the storm sewer pipes, and we'd also commented on the outlet control structure. Based on the plan, it was located in the forebay, which is not allowed and needs to be relocated to the detention area. I will say I have had conversations with the engineer. We're working through finalizing the detail of the functionality of the pond and where that outlet control structure will be located, things like that. However, that's just moving a structure. Size and volume of the pond is all there and accounted for. So no layout changes anticipated based on calculations. We also had a note in here, based on review of the plans, details, drainage calculations, and geotechnical report, it appears the groundwater level may fluctuate and cause the proposed pond to potentially lose channel protection rate control volume as required by the county in the retention storage portion of the pond. However, that being said, the township's volume and release rate requirements have been met in the detention storage portion of the pond. We just recommend the groundwater continue to be reviewed for their retention area. Paving and grading, the applicant must provide additional details for ADA accessible parking and ramp areas. We also noticed that plans appear to show grading and silt fence work outside of the property line on the south side. I did have a conversation when I was talking with the engineer. They noted that that was shown, and they will keep the work on their property or work with the other property owner to gain access to that part of the property. Lastly, a soil erosion and sedimentation control permit is from the counties required, so the applicant should acquire that and submit to the township for record. So with that, Fishbeck recommends the Planning Commission grant Tractor Supply site plan dated February 19th, 2025, final site plan approval. The applicant should review all the comments listed above and amend the plans prior to moving forward through the pre-construction phase with the township. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Director Akers, I believe we have something from the fire marshal.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We have a letter from the fire marshal dated March 24th, 2025, where the fire marshal had performed the review on the proposed Tractor Supply building. There were a few comments that the fire marshal had that indicated these comment from prior letters, and they indicated that these projects were compliant or they had been addressed. So one of them is with regards to water supply. They were required to provide an approved water supply, which the fire marshal indicates is compliant. The applicant was also requested to provide an emergency access plan showing that they were able to provide fire department access, which the fire marshal had indicated in his most recent letter that they were compliant, with a note that on 3/20/2025, additional ladder truck details were sent to Neverveld for review, and per their CAD operator, the emergency vehicle path is easily accessible. Some other general comments that the fire marshal had brought up, it expressed some provisions with regards to emergency responder radio coverage in new buildings, and they had specifically highlighted that those were addressed on sheet C-205-17, and then specifically listed comments requiring a Knox box being required for this facility, and this was indicated that it was addressed on sheet C-205, number 16. So that concludes the fire marshal's review. I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on. Presentation by the applicant.
I'm Derek Marine with CBE, Project Manager. Got a lot of history with Tractor Supply, so if there's any questions with that, I'll be happy to answer. And then I did bring some samples that we brought at the earlier meetings, if anybody would like to see those as well. Turn it over to Steve.
Commissioners, my name is Steve Whitty from Netterveld. We're the design engineer for the project. First of all, thank you for your time and consideration regarding this request. Especially thank you to the township staff. This project has taken a long time to get to this point, but hopefully we're close to the finish line. As Vidya had mentioned, we obtained preliminary site plan approval on the rezone almost a year ago now. And then since that time, we actually haven't been sitting back. We've been working diligently actually with Wayne County to try to get them to a point where we get approval from them. And we do have now their written approval saying they recommend approval. Short of, I sent them the plans after they sent the letter saying everything's been addressed. So we're still waiting for the final approval letter, but all their comments have been addressed. I won't go over the plan again unless you want me to. I'll just stick to maybe some of the main changes from the last time that you saw. I think Vidya went through pretty much all of them. All the conditions that I'm aware of on the preliminary site plan have been addressed, and those conditions have been met. Just a couple of things, though, to also point out to you. When you saw it about a year ago, we actually had a live goods center, kind of a garden center shown south of the building. TSC actually changed that. They don't have that anymore. So if you look closely, that's taken off the plan now. So I just wanted to point that out to you. The other important thing I think to point out is, and Vidya mentioned this, the building that we had shown before, the vestibule was higher than what it should have been. So now the architect has revised that down to the 30-foot height. Color-wise, Derek did bring samples of what the brick would look like. That hasn't really changed since the first Planning Commission meeting, but he did bring samples again in case the Planning Commission did want to see that. The other biggest change from a design standpoint is with working through the county, the stormwater detention area and the design has changed some. It got a little larger than what I was expecting. In my opinion, it's an extremely conservative design. What I mean by that is we have basically the same amount of volume that I'm required to have. I have that in retention, and I don't even count the retention towards my design. So in other words, I've got, in my opinion, more than double the volume that I really need to make that function. But again, we meet the county standards, and I believe we meet the township standards, and I'll work with the township engineer to address the remaining comments. I did receive all the staff comments letters, which were just read. I'll continue to work with the fire department and with the planner and the township engineer to address those remaining items. That being said, if you have any questions at this point on anything related to the project or the engineering, I'd be more than happy to answer those types of questions. Anything business related wise, Derek could help you there. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Commissioners, the floor is open. Comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, I did notice that the outdoor goods paddock was not on the set of plans. I'm glad you explained that. It was I mean, hey, what happened to that? But that's just Tractor Supply is moving away from that in the design. There was no engineering reason or anything.
Nope, they've done, we're currently working on 3 different sites, and on all 3 of them, they took them off. So I think it's just I don't know why they did that, but it's a universal thing. It's nothing related to Van Buren Township or this particular site.
Mr. Chair, I know that the applicant brought materials samples again. I know that it's very important for our overlay district that they use the approved samples. And as Ms. Krishnan pointed out, it would be very bad to go ahead with construction with a change in those materials. But we do understand that sometimes materials do have to change. I was wondering if, for the benefit of the members of the audience and as a reminder for us on the board, just if staff could briefly explain what the applicant should do if they run into the situation where a material is unavailable?
Right. If for some reason, when during your process, you're ordering the materials, and I'm assuming before you start putting the materials on, you place the brick order in bulk, and for some reason that particular lot or batch you don't get the enough brick and you have to do something that is a closer shade of it, please do not place an order for the whole thing. Get a sample. Director Akers will place you on the very next Planning Commission meeting. Let the Planning Commission see it and give you the green signal, and you can place your order. It will not set you back by more than 2 weeks max. Okay. We would rather not have you place an order and have those thousands of bricks delivered to your lot, and then you come and say, oops, we would prefer not to have that done.
I know things could change, but right now we're good.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I say, you won't be delayed by more than 2 weeks, but if you put them up, it's going to be longer than 2 weeks.
A project or 2 do that, so we definitely don't want to do that, so.
Yes, we have.
Being considerate of that.
Absolutely.
I don't have any other comments on the site other than to say that I'm looking forward to having a Tractor Supply in that part of the township. It looks like it will be a very nice building.
Anybody else? Comments? Questions?
No, looks good.
Okay, moving ahead then. Public. Do we have anybody from the public that would like to ask questions or speak? Anyone from the public? Please come up to the podium and introduce yourself and give us your address.
Lifelong resident, Van Buren Township. March 5th, been 72 years here. We had a water tower back then when I was born. No, I'd just like to say that thank consideration for the board for looking at this.
Excuse me, could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Traskus. I used to work for Van Buren Township when I lived in Van Buren Township as a fire chief years, many, many moons ago.
I do
And,
remember.
But anyways, I'd like to go back and just thank the Planning Commission for the countless hours you folks have put into this. The engineering staff from Tractor Supply, we want to thank you. So we're happy to see some industrial stores coming in on the south end of Van Buren Township. Sumter Road's a major thoroughfare through there. And I happen to know Tim and Jenna down at the Sumter Ace Hardware, personal friends of mine. That's where usually I go, And this Tractor Supply, they welcome the business in the community also, because it's really, Ace Hardware carries different stuff than what Tractor Supply does. Tractor Supply carries different stuff than what Ace Hardware does. So there should be no conflict of anything, price slashing or anything. And we just like to say thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Comments from the public? Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I would entertain some action by the commission if they so desire.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Jar.
I would move to grant the applicant CBE LLC, Brian Lebrand, on behalf of Tractor Supply, the final site plan approval to construct a 22,407 square foot retail building, parking, landscaping, and affiliated site improvements at the site located at the southeast corner of Sumter Road and Hull Road, based on the analysis and subject to the conditions detailed in the McKenna letter dated March 16th, 2025, Fishbeck Engineering letter dated March 13th, 2025, and the Van Buren Township Fire Report dated March 24th, 2025.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Beginning roll call vote. Commissioner Jeff Jar,
Yes.
Commissioner Medina Atchison,
Yes.
Treasurer Sherry Budd,
Yes.
Commissioner Peter Creel,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson Paul,
Yes.
Chair Brian Cullen.
Yes.
Roll call complete.
Motion carries. You have your final site plan review. Looking forward to it, to the new addition to the township. Thank you. Okay, we move ahead now. Item number 3. Non-residential planned unit development amendment. Article 6, supplemental zoning district standard, Chapter 5, planned unit developments, commercial, office, and industrial. First up, presentation by the township staff, Director Akers.
Thank you very much. I will defer my presentation to Vidya, our township planner.
Thank you, Ron. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. This is before you tonight for a public hearing, but this is the sixth time it's coming back. So I think the Planning Commission is very well versed in this PUD ordinance now. You have worked with it from scratch. Every portion of this ordinance has been put together by the Planning Commission. You have gone over it section by section. This ordinance came about as a result of the fact that we have a ordinance for residential PUDs. We have a PRD ordinance, but we have nothing similar for industrial, commercial developments. And a PUD is an invaluable development tool that allows for flexibility without sending people for variances. If applied properly, it can help a community get improved and much higher quality design while providing developers what they want, while the community also gets a much bigger benefit of it. We currently don't have any such tool, and variances are not something you want to send people for, because for variances you have to actually demonstrate hardship, not just because, you know, I want something, so I'm going to go and get a variance. So this is an very detailed and thoroughly written ordinance. It puts forth what kind of uses. Not just everybody can apply for a PUD. There are certain eligibility criteria that they have to meet in order to become a PUD. PUDs are allowed only in certain districts. These type of PUDs will be allowed only in the C1, C2, which are the two commercial districts, the Office Technology District, the M1 Light Industrial, the M2 General Industrial, and the MT, the Industrial Transportation District. These are the only districts in which they shall be approved. Then there are a specific list of uses that would be allowed, and it also excludes uses that will not be permitted, such as, you know, junkyards, sexually oriented businesses. So the ordinance is very clear what kind of uses we will not allow in the PUDs. Because the underlying zoning districts, such as M2s, do permit junkyards. We wanted to make sure that that is not folded into a PUD. So we made sure when we are listing the uses, we took some of the uses out from the underlying zoning districts, so they are not permitted. Then we put in design standards in terms of lot coverage. If a developer wants to exceed lot coverage, they have to demonstrate to you under what circumstances would the Planning Commission grant that flexibility. They have to up the design standards. Then we go to design standards. What kind of building setbacks? And the building setbacks that you require are pretty significant. And these setbacks are in recognition of the fact that these PUDs might be located in sensitive areas, next to maybe single-family residential subdivisions. So you're putting together enough separation between them and the residential development, and you're giving enough room for these to be heavily landscaped so that there are no nuisance claims from the residents, and at the same time, the residents don't have any adverse impacts from these industrial uses. So there are requirements for building height, parking and loading, architectural interest, which is a really new thing because currently we don't really have industrial building architectural standards. But for PUD, we are requiring developers to try and attempt at least to have improved level of architecture in their buildings. We do have open space requirements, frontage and access, roads and driveways. One of the important things the Planning Commission did discuss is landscaping and screening. And we do cross-reference it back to our section 10.103, which is currently the landscaping provisions in our zoning ordinance. It's one of the best written landscaping provisions I've seen of any zoning ordinance. It cross-references that. And we made sure that we have checked with that to make sure that the protections are there if and when it abuts another use, what happens. We also have provisions for if this PUD goes on a property that's got an existing historic structure or a non-conforming structure, we are not asking for that structure to be toned down, so we can preserve that. And if a PUD is faced, because in most cases, PUDs ends up being a really big project. You can't really construct it in one phase. It's a massive investment. So you want to ensure that should, in the event, a PUD not be completed, if it is only half completed, it still looks complete. At whatever phase it is left, it should be standalone. So we have the phasing proposals in for that. And should somebody want to revise a PUD, they will have to come back before you. You cannot just make changes like an amended site plan. It has to go through a PUD amendment process. And a PUD amendment process will have to go before the Planning Commission and back to the Board of Trustees. It's a two-step process to amend a PUD. And finally, performance guarantees. Because these are big projects, we want to make sure, like you're collecting a bond, we just want to make it official in the ordinance itself. The key difference between other projects, a special land use and a PUD, just like a PRD, an agreement is executed between the township and between the developer. And the agreement sets forth the terms of what you're agreeing, all the infrastructure improvements, all the specific deviations that the Planning Commission is granting. And the deviations are being granted in exchange for what additional site improvements the applicant is going to make, what additional landscaping protections they're going to pay. Everything is going to be listed out in the agreement, and that agreement will go with the property. Should the PUD transfer ownership and some other developer should end up buying the whole thing, the agreement will run with the development in perpetuity. So that is very important to note. So this ordinance is well vetted, and I think at this point it's a really good document. It's a good ordinance. We have put our best foot forward. That said, ordinances always, the first project that comes through, you're like, okay, that's something we hadn't considered. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but I believe this ordinance covers whatever we anticipated in terms of looking at the long-term picture for the township's welfare, what will benefit the township, what will benefit the residents, and how we will protect the township's well-being and also our natural resources and all of it. It looks at the wholesome picture itself. So it is on your agenda tonight for a public hearing. We did not receive any public comment that I know of, unless Ron did not get anything either. So if you are satisfied with the draft, it's before you tonight to make a motion to send it on to the Board of Trustees.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions, comments concerning it?
I think it's a great document. I think it places reasonable limits on the power of the township to police zoning rules while still allowing flexibility for larger projects. I think I predicted a meeting or two ago that it would stand up well to public scrutiny, and we didn't receive any negative comment, which is good. I feel like this is something that we should recommend to the township board for adoption.
Thank you. Anybody else? Comments?
Yeah, through the chair, I agree with Commissioner Butt. I thank you to our staff and planners for putting in a lot of hours into this. As you guys said, I'm sure you're sick of seeing this and looking over PUDs, so thank you guys, and we really appreciate your work.
I'm not sick of it. I'm looking forward to applying it.
What, 2-3 times? They've seen it every day for a few years.
Anybody else? Ms. Krishner, could you clarify one point that just came across my mind? And it deals with the fact, does the owner of the property still have an opportunity to subdivide the property under the PUD? Or if we run into a situation like we had with Walden Woods, where something isn't complete and somebody comes in and wants to buy another section of the property, is the entire property staying under that PUD?
Yes, I think we ran into it in Walden Woods because I think Cedar Chase tried to split it and buy it, and we determined that they couldn't do it. So they had to go back to the original owner and amend a portion of that PUD. So the PUD stays intact.
Okay.
Remain intact, the boundaries of the PUD, because when a PUD is reviewed and you're looking at eligibility, you're looking at the PUD as a whole. So you cannot subdivide and remove portions of it, because that way are you removing certain criteria, that certain portions of the PUD that you looked at in order to determine that it is actually eligible for it. So I would say you're not going to subdivide a PUD. Once you're looking at a parcel in its entirety as a PUD, it remains as a PUD. A PUD can always be amended, and maybe other people can be added to the PUD to develop portions of it, but the PUD by itself will remain intact.
That's what I was hoping for. I wanted to make sure that was.
I think we ran into it at Cedar Chase, right, Ron? I mean, they wanted to take it off, and then we realized they couldn't do it, which is why they had to go back and amend the Walden Woods.
Okay, that answers the only question I had. If there aren't any others, I'd be glad to entertain a motion.
Well, Mr. Chair, I am in favor of it, so I think at this time I would move to recommend to the Township Board that they adopt the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance text to permit non-residential plan unit developments in commercial office and industrial zoning, specifically in sections Article 6, Supplemental Zoning District, Chapter 5, Plan Unit Developments, as was presented in this evening's materials.
Support.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jars, supported by Commissioner Pohl. Roll call, or discussion on the motion, excuse me. Seeing none, I'd entertain a roll call vote, please.
Beginning roll call vote. Commissioner Jackson Paul,
Yes.
Commissioner Peter Creel, Treasurer Sherry Budd, Commissioner Jeff Jar,
Yes.
Commissioner Medina Atchison,
Yes.
Chair Brian Cullen.
Yes.
Call complete.
Motion carries. We'll send this on to the Township Board, finally, for approval. Moving on to item number 4, Commercial Exterior Lighting Standard Zoning Ordinance. It's discussion for us, presentation by the staff. Director Akers.
For the last time this evening, defer to our township planner, Vidya.
Thank you, Ron. Good evening, Commissioners. Before you is an amendment to our lighting ordinance. I don't know if the Commissioners recollect. I told you that a lot of developers for all of the recent projects have actually brought to our attention that our illumination standards are not okay. They said your illumination standards are so low that they do not meet their safety requirements. We heard this complaint from Kenworth, we heard it from Sheets, we heard it from Ashley, we are hearing it right now from McDonald's for their rebuild. And since we heard it from multiple people, and this was something that was, initially we told them, these are our ordinance standards, you have to comply. Some of them were so determined that they were even willing to go for a variance for it. And at that point, the moment somebody says variance, I'm like, what is your hardship? And when they started presenting data saying why it was a safety concern, now when somebody says safety, public health, safety, and welfare is a very key marker. So we said, okay, let us step back and let us take a look at our ordinance and see whether our ordinance needs fixing rather than send you for a variance. And when we started looking at our ordinance, we realized that our ordinance was probably, it needed updating. So the standards in our ordinance became very restrictive because they were changed at a time when we used to have our gas stations used to be very, very overly illuminated. So I think this was a couple of decades ago. When we modified them, we put in such restrictive standards that we completely tightened it up so much that the illumination standards went super low. So our current ordinance standards, the way we have it structured, just to give you an example, we say for off-street parking areas, the maximum illumination, it says for sidewalks in non-residential areas, the maximum level of illumination shall be 1 foot candle. So Brittany and I were looking, we were like, okay, what would be an example of 1 foot candle illumination? So it said, simply put, 1 foot candle is, how bright would it be standing 1 feet from an illuminated candle? You light a candle and stand 1 feet away, how much light would you get? Well, that's the level of illumination we allow on commercial sites, which is not safe if you're talking about, say you're on a Walmart site, public sidewalk, or Menards. I mean, in winter it gets dark early. This is not just about safety. I mean, in winter there's probably ice or snow. You want to be able to see where you're stepping in the parking lot. Our levels in these areas are very, very low. So we decided, Ron and myself are discussing that maybe we need to fix our ordinance so that it meets the requirements for the sites while not overly illuminating it. And in order to address the concern that these lights don't shine out into the sky to create a sky glow, which we are trying to avoid. We don't want this, we still want to have a dark sky. We don't want to have these sites that you can see from a mile away. We wanted to put in other requirements. So currently, the ordinance has got very restrictive lighting standards. We compared it to other communities. We pulled up the regulations for other communities which are also known to be more restrictive in their ordinance. Northville, Plymouth, Novi, Canton, and all are actually known to be more stringent in their ordinance. So we tried to see what they say, and we were way more stringent than any of them. So we tried to look at theirs. Currently, our ordinance also grants the planning director discretion in determining illumination limits for areas that are not expressly described. It places a lot of burden on the planning director. I remember Dan used to run into this often. People would come and say, I have this area, it's neither a loading zone nor is it a display area, it is in this no man's zone, I want to put it in this. Now it's up to Dan to figure out whether it's not. It just makes it very difficult because he's trying to determine something, is it going to go contrary to what the Planning Commission wants? We want to remove that. We want to put that kind of discretionary detail under the Planning Commission's purview, so that if you want additional illumination on a site, you show it on your photometric plan when you're coming for site plan approval. Let the Planning Commission take a look at it and say, okay, it's good to go. Don't not show it on your photometric plan and come after the fact and get the planning director to now start to decide where you want higher light. Because then the planning director is trying to do a guesswork of maybe it's okay, and once the lights are up, you're like, okay, now that looks too bright. We don't want to get into that. So we are removing the discretionary authority from the planning director and putting it under the planning commission, because that's where it should belong. We are also changing it where our ordinance currently doesn't have very clear direction on what should be on a photometric plan when site plan is submitted. We want to make it very clear. When you submit a site plan, it needs to have a full photometric plan. It needs to have every fixture's cut sheet detail so we can see what you're actually putting in. So if you look at the draft text amendment that is attached, we took the existing ordinance and the red strike-throughs, the red text basically shows you what new text we are adding. We added clear distinction. This is not applicable to single-family homes. So we don't want residents to get upset that this is going to be applying to their houses. This is not for single-family homes. This is strictly for commercial, industrial. Single-family homes, subdivisions, residents, this is not for any of them. So they are not going to be affected by this. This is for all non-residential, non-single-family residential uses. It will be applicable to apartments, though. because they are technically not single-family residential. When we say the light source shall not be seen, you still have light pollution when the lens is dropped. We have noticed when your lens is like a bubble. So we added in the distinction that the lens should be flat. That way the light doesn't tend to spill out. We have been enforcing it. We have been asking all developers to do it, and they've been following it, but it's not there in the ordinance. We thought, let's just put it in the ordinance so we are not, having that ambiguity. We clarified the illumination levels based for each area. We took off these specific areas where it's specifying off-street parking, off-street loading, sidewalks. Instead, we kept it simple. We said building entrances, you have to have 5-foot candles. That is consistent with what other communities do. Because at the entrances, you need to have clear light going in and out.
No more than 5.
Maximum is 5, minimum is 0.5. Correct, I'm sorry, I clarify. That's maximum level of illumination. Then in case of vehicle and pedestrian circulation areas, which would be the driveways, parking, loading, display, sidewalk seating, 2 would be the maximum, 0.5 would be the minimum. They can go up to 5 maximum with Planning Commission approval, and that will depend on where the site is located. If the site is located, say, next to a freeway or, in an area where you think it's not going to affect any nearby neighborhoods or something, and the applicant can demonstrate to you why they need additional lighting in that area, the Planning Commission can allow it up to a maximum of 5. Directly below gas station canopies, 20. That is what you have currently in the ordinance. We are keeping it. We don't want to make all the gas stations non-conforming. This is what has been applied to all gas stations. It's worked well so far. And we do require that under gas stations, all the lights have to be flush. Nothing can be a drop lens. So unless our gas stations, except for the really old ones, all the ones that have been constructed in the last 10, 15 years, they're all compliant. And then adjacent to a single-family residential, adjacent to a residential zone or use, the maximum you can still have is 0.5. We really don't want any light. 0.5, you cannot help it. That amount of little bit of light, backlight will be there. You cannot avoid that. And if it's not adjacent to residential, you can have it up to 1. So basically, if you look at the next page, on page 3, light trespass, the red strikeout line, that text, we actually moved it into the table. It is still there, we just moved it into the table and put it at the bottom, rather than have it as a text. With regard to uplighting, a lot of people now have landscape uplighting, like for commercial properties, you have a sign and you put lights to light it. These fixtures generally have adjustable heads, and in most times, if the fixture heads are not adjusted, the light just shines straight out into the sky. So we wanted to make sure that if you have lights that are used to accent the building features, like you have maybe a nice brick column and you want to highlight the brick column for the building, we want to make sure that your fixture head should be directed only at the architectural features or the sign. It's the property owner's responsibility to do that. By putting it in the ordinance, you're making it code enforceable. So if the fixture is not pointing, your code enforcement officer can go there and tell them, change the direction and fix it so that it is pointing the right way.
How about a flagpole? Because the light, American flag needs to be lighted if it's displayed at night. Do they light it from the top, or some like to light it from the bottom? Now that's an uplighting, and there's nothing really to capture that light as it goes up.
The flag, I would guess, would be exempt. The flag would be exempt.
Probably need to add that, right? Sorry, I said, I think that might be something that would need to be added to the ordinance, right? Is it?
Well, it's under exempt lighting number 8. It
Yeah, I'm
says
guessing it
instances
should be
where
somewhere
federal,
here.
state, or local laws,
Yeah.
rules or regulations take precedence, and lighting an American flag is a federal,
Federal, yes.
not a law, so.
I just thought it was more of a moral requirement, but that's.
You can't have a flag without a light on it.
If you
Yeah,
display it
lighting up the
at
flag
night.
is something, I've always seen the flags uplit. I've never seen a downlit flag, but I've always seen flags uplit.
Since we're talking about, just as a suggestion, maybe we ought, since we're updating the text, maybe you ought to spell that out in there, that flags are considered to be an exempt source. That way there's no question.
Item
Somebody
8
doesn't
itself,
know.
I will specify it. This includes
Yeah, if we have to ask that question, someone else will have to ask that question. Why not answer it in the document since we're doing the edit?
This includes the, what would be the correct way of citing it? This includes the US flag?
It would include lighting of the United States flag, yeah.
This includes,
The state has a requirement on it or not?
The Van Buren flag right there.
I don't think we have an ordinance where we gotta illuminate the Van Buren flag.
What? Where's your pride?
rest of the text is fine. We added a new section called administration. So right now, we don't have a photometric plan requirement. We just require a photometric plan under the general site plan review requirements, which has got a broad thing, any other information as deemed necessary. We go under that clause, but we would rather have it clearly spelled out that we need a photometric plan, so we put in this. I think it is there in our site plan checklist.
I think it is.
But it is there in the site plan checklist, but it's good to have it in the ordinance itself, so we're just clearly adding it in.
I noticed also on outdoor building and, or excuse me, on recreational facility lighting, is there a maximum lighting or a minimum lighting requirements for that? I did not see that in the table.
Which category are you looking at?
Prohibited lighting,
Prohibited.
and it says recreational facility lighting. And you talk about the length of time, but we don't talk about the intensity of the lights. Is there, is that to be installed by recommended?
That would fall under the same category as any other non-residential use. Recreational
Okay.
lighting, private or public, would fall under the same category as any other non-residential use.
Would that be like a baseball field? Is that what we're talking
Yeah, or
about?
football field, like, yeah, think of a football field.
And that is standard, turning them off at 11 PM, because it might be, I mean, it might be a community sporting event, but it can still, not everybody, after 11 PM, not everybody would enjoy it. Some people just want their quiet time without the extra lights.
Just as a note, there's 2 Fs, there needs to be a G.
Thank you. I seem to do this all the time.
I know you'd catch it sooner or later.
Want to go? You want me?
Video, just a question on the comparison
Okay.
community standards.
Okay?
For example, like if you look at some of the communities say nothing. It's just you have like just a hyphen in there or in there. Does that mean for Plymouth and Canton, for example, the off-street parking areas, that means the developer can do whatever they want?
They don't regulate it. The planning commission.
Do whatever they want?
Yeah, they pretty much do, but Canton has other ways of looking at the regulation. They look at the photometrics and then they say just how brightly lit is the area. They look at it. Their ordinance doesn't specify the limits, but I know they look at the site as a whole.
I just see a lot of blanks for the other communities, and, you know, we have something in each category, the height, the property line. Oh, I guess we're missing entire site, you know.
Yeah, that's why we simplified ours, Medina. We thought ours was a little bit too extensive. That is why we struck out all that and we clubbed it into one category. We didn't want to make it so difficult for developers that they're like, okay, now I'm at sidewalk, now I'm at general sidewalk. We wanted to make it easier to read. Okay, general 2, if you want to go up to 5, show it, let the planning commission. This especially is of biggest concern in fast food restaurants, because most of them are open 24 hours or at least till late. So they're always worried when their customers leave late at night to go to their cars in the parking lot. They don't want it to be dimly lit, which is a valid concern. So we want to be sure that our current regulations are very, very low illumination, and we sort of understood that might not be the best, so.
Just clarification question on one of your illumination levels in the chart, you have pedestrian circulation areas. And you spell out sidewalks and so forth. And then under the exemption lighting, you have pedestrian walkway lighting as an exemption. So are we setting the levels for pedestrian to be at a minimum, or are those exempt from the lighting?
So pedestrian walkway lighting is those little stake thingies that you get to,
Oh, like the landscape?
Ground-mounted things.
ground-mounted, those solar lights, those accent lighting, pedestrian, maybe I should specify that pedestrian walkway lighting is those little accent, you get
Yeah, I
24
think
in a
we,
box.
I mean, I think it makes sense to
Okay.
accent lighting, walkway accent lighting or something.
That's a great idea.
Excellent.
Just because I was confused.
Confused, yeah.
I mean, I get
Pedestrian
confused
walkway
easily, but-
accent lighting, okay, good idea.
Very smart. And then what about the flashing or moving lights? We have a couple where there is moving. What are we gonna do with them?
We prohibit
And
it.
on the signs, you mean? Like
the
our-
sign Where it
yeah.
says, flashing or, they can't have moving?
No, we don't allow that. We don't allow any flashing, moving or intermittent type where the light goes in, stops.
Right, but we have some that move.
You mean on a sign?
Yeah.
I think the ordinance says that under, right above prohibited lighting, D, it says illumination of signs shall be in accordance with Article 11. So signs aren't covered here. So any prohibited lighting in this section E, flashing or moving lights, that's gotta be not signs, right?
Right, so,
One on the service drive that moves.
so you're talking about the electronic message board signs where the sign is scrolling, right? That has got a timing requirement. If you look at the sign
Article 11.
provisions, we have a timing requirement on how fast the sign can scroll. It
Okay.
cannot scroll. We do have the requirement. This is where it's intended to like sort of get your attention by flashing. I don't know if you remember the Black Rock in Canton used to have this strobe lights that maybe they were attracting customers from Mars, I don't know, because that's where their lights were shining to, in my opinion, but they used to shine somewhere up there. You could see them from 696, I thought, because I had no idea where they were shining to, but you could see it from far, far away.
Approach.
I mean, if you're coming from Mars, for sure you would find it, but I had no idea what it
Were
was.
those moving spotlights, like they
Yes,
park them on a
the
trailer and then
huge
they
ones,
kind
yes.
of rotate? Yep,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I had no idea what purpose they served. I don't know how many people look and say, oh, look, there is a strobe light, I'm going to go and eat there. I don't know.
So those would not be allowed.
Searchlight's not
be
allowed
allowed.
specifically in section E,
Yeah.
because it's not a sign, so it would be no searchlights.
And it's very distracting. I mean, it's,
We just had them at one point, didn't we?
Hmm?
Didn't we just had them in the township?
They did on the service drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, what,
Would they call that temporary festival and civic lighting?
yeah, I'm trying to remember what that event was.
Well, it blinked.
No, this was like the spotlights that, you know, go like this and rotate and shoot up in the,
I'm surprised that was allowed so near the airport too, because that would definitely interfere. You're
I just
near
remember it was
Willow
there.
Run
I can't remember
and
what the
Metro.
event was, but
Yeah, I don't remember. I know what you're talking about. I remember seeing it and
Is when
thinking, hey, that's not
Diamondback
right.
opened?
it might have been Diamondback when the Diamondback Music Hall opened.
Yeah.
But anyway, I didn't want to, let's not bring up the past. Sorry, God.
A couple of questions about code enforcement, if now seems like a good time. So how does building and planning, for permitting purposes or code enforcement, how do you verify the light levels? How does our staff do that?
So there are light intensity meters where you can measure the light illuminations. I'm not sure that we have one actually.
I was going
But,
to ask.
but there are light intensity meters that you can purchase. You have to have them calibrated periodically. They're the same. They have noise meters and they have other things too. But we're in the process of purchasing some of those things, so that way we have them. But yeah, there are meters that measure foot candle levels.
There isn't anything in the rewrite of the ordinance that covers the brightness, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Or let me ask it a different way. Is there anything in this document that controls the brightness of light reflected off of a building? If I have a really, really white building and I shine properly down-shielded, you can't see the filament directly lights, and they hit that wall of that building and reflect off, is there anything that controls how bright that building can appear?
No, not that I
Do
know.
you put that stuff in a photometric plan, the material colors?
Never seen building material colors put on a photometric plan because
Or, it's like a,
Well, it kind of goes to the, how do you measure the light coming off of the property? I mean, if it's lay a meter down on the property line and see what hits it, I suppose if the building is very bright, it would reflect onto it, right? I mean, do we need to have, I ask because there's an architectural trend that I've seen in some neighborhoods where people are putting down lights on their eaves, okay? Buried up under their eaves.
Yes,
These
I've seen
big,
that a
long
lot.
LED lights. And some of them are very, subdued and are a nice accent light. And some are very, very bright. And I suspect more commercial buildings will be wanting to do that too. And I'm pretty sure some of the ones I've seen are brighter than, well, certainly brighter than every other house in a neighborhood.
So I have seen requirements about whether the light is hot or cold, because that makes a difference. Because when the light gets really hot, you can
Bright
see it.
white, you mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it is bright white, like you said, when it is subdued, probably the accent lighting, the same lighting that you have downlighting over here, if you change the bulb to a different one, it's going to look more intense. So I do know Canton has got a provision where they regulate what kind of, whether it's warm or whether it is that bright hot, cold, whatever they call it. I can take a look at it and see how they regulate that to prevent exactly what you're saying. To prevent, it might technically meet all the requirements of the ordinance, concealed light source, downward directed, shielded, yet it is blinding.
So the commissioner just pointed out to me, under prohibited lighting, what was it, outdoor building and landscape lighting? Unshielded illumination of a building or landscaping is prohibited except outdoor residential lighting of 100 watts or equivalent or less, and outdoor non-residential lighting of 50 watt equivalent or less. So I don't know how that mixes with the commercial, lighting up the column. That was an example you brought up with an uplight. So I'm not sure how well that meshes. And as a technical point, the technology has changed. I don't know, 100 watts or equivalent, you might want to spell that out in lumens, because a 100 watt incandescent bulb is the same as an 18 watt LED bulb, or even less. The LED is even more efficient. So if you say you're allowed to put 100 watts of light up and you put it up in bright white LEDs, that's going to be a very, very brightly lit building. But spelling it out in lumens, and you could say in there, 100 watts, 1600 lumens, meaning 100 watt incandescent equivalent. But spelling that out in terms of the actual brightness unit would probably be a good addition, given that the lighting technology has changed. What do you think? This is one of the things you were pointing out too, right?
Yeah, that, and then I could be off on terminology here, but yeah, it's similar. Or anything as
The terminology.
Yeah, that's right. Surface of an area, right? Whereas a lumen is just a density kind of. But
And when you talk about the color, it's with
Little front foot.
it's calling light bulbs 100 watt. Everybody knew what a 100 watt light bulb was,
Exactly.
but now, it's hard to get a real 100 watt light bulb. Yeah, good luck. I've got a stash, but I don't know if you can buy them so easily anymore.
I know they still market them as like equivalent, so it's like a
Yeah,
60 watt equivalent or 100 watt
60
equivalent.
but
or-
only
but
uses
it's-
14
Yeah,
watts.
yeah.
So just clarifying that, I think, since we're taking the time to update the ordinance, right, we ought to modernize it.
Section of definitions for commonly used terms, because we are using terms like this so people would know what foot candles, lumens, watts, LED, what are these things we are referring to is.
The lighting standard has to be understandable from an engineering standpoint, so it needs to use engineering terms, but it should also be understandable from I live in Van Buren Township standpoint, right? So a little bit of explanation of terms wouldn't go astray, in my opinion.
Got it.
I like the simplification of it. Like Commissioner Atchison pointed out, a lot of your comparison documents had those dashes for those line items. When I count up the line items that you're going to, basically, you're proposing to eliminate from the ordinance, it pretty much covers all of those ones that Plymouth and Canton don't have an entry for as well, you know? So I think the simplification looks good. I think that removing the value judgment, or whatever we want to call it, the discretion of the planning director, probably helps staff out a lot, remove a lot of the burden that, you know, that I know Director Power faced in
It
the
was
past.
especially challenging with the Kenworth site because they had the outdoor display of the trucks, and some of their display areas were not in any specific zone. So it was a struggle to figure out which kind of area they would fit in. And Director Power was also sensitive to the fact that it's on the service drive. You want it to be, you want the display to be seen because that's the whole point why that business is over there. But at the same time, you don't want it to be over illuminated, but it placed a lot of burden on trying to figure out what was the right thing to do.
See the beautiful Kenworth trucks at 2:30 in the morning, well after 11 p.m. Since you brought it up, is the Kenworth site compliant with its photometric plan right now? Because, you know, I hear people comment on, gee, it's awfully bright. It's a nice building, it looks good. I've never heard anyone say that Kenworth is not a good-looking building. But I have heard people say, but wow, is it bright?
The short answer is we don't have a meter that measures foot candles.
I can tell you, but going by it every morning before 7 o'clock, you don't miss it. You do not miss that building.
But as a point of comparison, I mean, I know that Kenworth was one of the reasons that we are looking at this, because they had concerns about brightness, and it was one of the issues that Director Power ran into was they wanted more light, and our ordinance required less light. As a point of comparison, I'm just wondering where on the light scale did they land? Because it does look more bright than other businesses in the township. And if we're talking about raising the entire township to that level of brightness, I feel like we need to know that.
Yeah. So that's why in those kind of sites where there is outdoor display and all, I would prefer the planning commission being the one to decide that.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can, if you see somebody asking for a variation, you can ask the applicant, show us pictures of other sites where this level of illumination is there, so we know what it's going to look like, and we can decide whether, like, okay, that doesn't look too bad. You know, how is
Right,
it going
for
to look
safety,
versus,
yeah.
wow, that's too much.
You know, just a comment, you know, there's a lot of theft, there's a lot of vandalism. I would imagine that the business owner of Kenworth needs the lighting to keep predators out. So
They didn't have a security fence, right? Or a really tall security fence.
security fences don't keep out criminals.
Yeah, who'd want to sleep
So-
overnight in a Kenworth?
No. So I would think that there's business reasoning behind why they have so much lighting. The only thing I could think of is that, you know, we have the ordinance that the lights go off at a certain time. That's also really bad for a car dealership, a service, you know, company. Even, remember when we had Continental, they had all of their, what did they have stolen? It's commonly stolen. We've had them stolen too. at
Catalytic
Atchison.
converters.
Yes, the Cadillac converters. So I'm not sure what to do other than we have to be like aware, like with what
But we're not
our
restricting.
consultant is saying, that we have to leave it up to the planning commission, and we have to sometimes put on our residents' hats, and sometimes we have to put on our business hats, and those businesses and those residents require different things.
Yeah, for sure.
And we have to be nimble with that. Or places like Kenworth will go, okay, we can't continue here, and they abandon a location.
Well, I can tell you, that probably won't happen. They are
I
very
hope
well
not.
lit.
I
They
hope
are
not.
very
Well, I'm
lit.
thinking if we come down on
Right.
them, you know.
Right, I understand
know,
your point.
So
Yeah.
just to clarify that point, we're not restricting, the only thing we're restricting time-wise is the recreational facility lighting, right?
Mhm.
I don't think that we're not putting a limit that you can't light up a parking lot.
Right, we're not telling council.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure, because that's, I mean, that's important for
Lights need to
for
be
your
on.
family business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kenworth, for Camping World, that hopefully will be opening soon. You know, that they need to light the parking lot for security. Meyer,
Walmart,
absolutely.
24-hour facilities, they need those parking lots.
I'd rather have it lit in that area than not lit.
I think we just need to aware, as Medina said, where those lights are.
Yeah,
And making
agreed.
sure that they're not affecting the residents or in that.
Downward, because
Right.
I'm sure their security cameras are also notifying the police if somebody's walking through the parking lot at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, because they're
Holding,
up to
holding
no
a
good.
cutoff saw.
Yeah.
The township is also pretty generous and it's compared to other communities, Medina, in terms of the height of light poles that they allow. I mean, the township is one of the few that allows light poles and allows the planning commission's discretion to raise them from 25 to 35 feet. Most communities I know have an absolute limit of 25 feet. They will not let you go above that, which means more poles. I would prefer fewer poles and 35 feet for well-illuminated lots, which is why businesses like Ashley and all appreciate that. You have well-designed poles, fewer poles than bunch of 25-foot poles.
And that's why your screening requirement that the light shouldn't be visible is important when we can go up that high. If it's 35 feet high, but it's properly screened so that you aren't looking into the filament
Correct.
or the LED, the chip, whatever it is. You know, I think your ordinance recommendation covers that pretty well. I mean, that's why we're allowed, I think that's why we can say we can make them taller, fewer poles, because they will have to be properly screened. They don't have a dome lens at 35 feet in the sky.
With our lighting requirements and our landscaping requirements, I think we are pretty good in making sure like we are meeting the needs of the businesses by allowing them for the security that they need and also protecting all the neighboring properties too. So I'll make all the corrections that you want and bring this back to you. And the next time it's before you, then you can set it for a public hearing. We want to get this in place before all of these new businesses start putting their light poles in.
Yeah.
Because I told them they cannot come before you with a site plan that does not meet our ordinance requirements. So they did comply even though they did not want to, but I said you cannot come before the PC with a plan that is non-compliant. So if a new ordinance is adopted, they can adjust their photometric plans and have it administratively approved at that point.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Absolutely.
Good work.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, with that. General discussion and updates, anything?
Yes.
Director Akers.
So I will be as brief as possible, kind of give the upcoming agenda items for the next few meetings, and then just kind of give a couple updates on a few other items. So, so I want to apologize. I know we've had our EV ordinance. It's kind of been sitting in limbo for quite a while, but we've been very, very busy with a lot of these other ordinance amendments that have taken precedence. Plus, you know, BES, the non-residential PUD, and a handful of other things that have come up that needed to be done urgently. So we still do have it on the radar, but we're working on a lot of other things right now. On April 30th, there is going to be an open house here at the township for the master plan / zoning ordinance housing amendment. So that's tentatively scheduled for April 30th. We'll probably be putting together public notices here very shortly for that. So please keep that evening open on your calendar. We'll be here at Township Hall.
I'm sorry, what date was that?
It is Wednesday, April 30th. So it'll be right here in this room. The other thing I wanted to update the Planning Commission on is we canceled the public hearing that we had scheduled for the battery energy storage system zoning ordinance provisions this evening due to the discussion we had at the last meeting and some of the changes that we're going to be proposing moving forward. I did want to highlight, though, I did have a conversation with a company that has the property under contract over off Rawsonville Road, and they did say that they would be willing to work with us. They'd be able to wait out our ordinance and you know, they'd be able to offer feedback as well. So they were willing to cooperate, which we appreciate. And so we did ask them a couple other questions about, like I asked them if they stacked storage units, which they said they did not. And you know, there were some other questions about noise and things that we asked, but nothing that seemed, I guess, out of what we discussed before. So they're gonna continue to work with us. I let them know we keep them up to date with our zoning ordinance update process, and that BES ordinance is looking to be back before the Planning Commission on May 14th is what it's tentatively scheduled. So before we get into our upcoming agendas, the other thing I wanted to say is that the township engaged on an ordered demolition of the former Legs Lounge, and that's down. So that is an open hole in the ground. They're going to fill that out, and that's taken care of as well. So the upcoming meetings on April 9th, we have TNT fireworks. I believe they're going at the Walmart site. So they're doing their temporary land use approval. On April 9th, the Planning Commission will see Camping World for a site plan amendment because there were some color changes to their building facade. So the Planning Commission will see them. We're also going to have a presentation for our housing master plan and zoning updates at the next meeting. And then there's going to be a discussion on a couple additional zoning amendments related to gas stations, which, as we had indicated, the township board put a moratorium on new permits. So those changes will be coming on the 9th, and then sign setbacks will also be coming on the 9th. April 23rd is going to be a very, very busy planning commission meeting. So we are going to have preliminary site plan. This is all tentative because it's still being reviewed, but we're having preliminary site plan reviews for the rebuild of McDonald's on Belleville Road. There's going to be preliminary site plan review for contract welding. Their preliminary site plan review for a building addition they're doing. There will be a preliminary site plan review for preliminary and final site plan review, excuse me, for L&W Engineering. They're building a canopy on the back of their building. And then there will be a public hearing, preliminary site plan review, and special land use recommendation for Chick-fil-A, which is proposed to go on Belleville Road. That will be before the Planning Commission on April 23rd. So I think that's everything, right? Did I miss anything?
You got it.
That was everything.
In that night, is that?
That's what I said.
Oh, we can break in between everything. But so no, long story short, we're very, very busy. I appreciate everybody's attendance. If we could all make sure we're here in April for some of these busier meetings, I would greatly appreciate it, because there are a lot of good projects. I know specifically our planners have worked really, really hard with Chick-fil-A and McDonald's to get them moving forward, and so we're looking forward to it. But that's all I have as far as an update. Happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you.
I just have always wanted to know, I remember we touched on it with the last master plan update, but how can we beg, other than fast food restaurants, to come here? Because I remember from the surveys, people were like, we'd like an Olive Garden, we'd like, there was other restaurants that they wanted sit down. We have one sit down, right? It's Applebee's, right? I can't think of any other ones that we have. So how can we?
Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel. Okay, we have two. How can we attract them?
So,
Other than the answer of, we only have so many rooftops. Something other than that.
there's a couple things that we do on the, I guess on the administrative side, like
So you
there's.
guys are doing stuff.
Yeah, so when we talk to developers and some of the owners of the strip malls periodically, and they ask us what we would like to see, restaurants are always the first thing that come out of our mouth. So we highlight them. I mean, some other things that we could do is, we could try to offer some type of, there's no tax abatements, there's no statewide programs that we're able to offer. The only thing we can really offer on the township side is fee-based. We could offer to waive fees if we wanted to, or waive some of our water and sewer charges. I mean, those are things that we could do to attract restaurants to come in. We actually have had a handful of new restaurants come into the community. I know Twisted Rooster did close, but we're still working with Morning Bell to get permitting through, so that way they can get started and do some facade changes. Agave recently opened up in Belleville Square, and they've been very successful from what I understand. you know, we've been having conversations with some other restaurants that are looking to go in some of the strip malls, some of which haven't announced yet, but, you know, we've had some conversations with some. So there are some that are coming. As far as, you know, it's tough right now from the conversations that I've had with some of the developers that are kind of in the area is that it's a tough market right now for restaurants, and they're not seeing a lot of new builds with them. But there are things that we can do. I know and we're always talking about having conversations as a way to engage and see what people want to see in the community and different things that we can do as well. So.
I did an observation. I was traveling and I was in Florida and I saw some very large strip malls. And they were empty last time I went through there. This time they're filled with 3 different churches. So I don't know if our ordinance allows for that, but maybe Kmart, the former Kmart, could become a church. But just a thought. Just a thought.
We'd have to take a look at our zoning code. I do know that there have been areas within Metro Detroit where you've had these larger non-denominational churches take over
Yeah,
big box
strip
store
malls.
sites. So, I mean, it's not impossible.
It's better than being empty, you know.
But that
We-
site was identified as one of our RRC's priority sites for redevelopment. So that is one of the plans that will be presented to you at your housing master plan as a redevelopment site. You will have a concept plan for redevelopment of the site. It is to be hoped that that site won't remain in its current abandoned state for endless. But that is definitely, we always circle back to that parcel. That's in our front and center in our view for redevelopment.
And we haven't quite gotten there yet, but, you know, based on the feedback of the last planning commission meeting, as Vidya said, we're looking at that site for looking at some different options. We are going to be we haven't gotten there yet, but we are going to be reaching out to Schoenstack, which owns the property, to talk to them about it as well, to get some feedback and make sure that they're aware of what we're doing and see if we can get some work together on trying to come up with a solution.
I like just to share with us like other things that I see, just like with the gas stations in Florida, you know, they had put a moratorium on those there because they had like, what was it, 200 that were in their work queue to get approved. And I'm like, wow.
Cape Coral Car Washes.
That's
right?
that's the
other one.
city.
So I
that
think
put it.
that if we are looking at things like changes to the ordinance to say disallow every corner of an intersection to be populated with the same business, say a gas station or a car wash every half a mile, that can only be good for our Main Street. Because maybe right now we can't get a restaurant to move in because the market isn't right. But if a parcel gets turned into a car wash and there are enough car washes or gas stations that they drive each other out of business, now you've got a parcel that can't be built on because it has a disused car wash or a gas station, and then you'll never get your restaurant or your other business that I think you're probably hoping for. Non-automotive service related businesses that make us look like we're just a highway stop. We're more than we're not just a highway stop.
Sure.
Yes, they're going through permitting with us right now. So I think, did we issue a building permit for them yet?
Yes, they got their building permit. They've paid some of their water fees. They just submitted for a sign permit. So they're moving forward a little slowly, but yes.
Yeah. What about the breakfast, brunch, and lunch? How is that coming along?
Morning Bell?
Yeah.
The ex-Twisted Rooster.
They just resubmitted plans to me, end of day today, so I have to get them back out tomorrow for their building permit. They are gonna be divided into 2 restaurants.
Say that again?
They're trying to divide it into 2 restaurants. It'll be Morning Bell and Blue Porch.
Porch.
Is the second one.
In the inside of the building into another tinier restaurant. They'll share the same kitchen, but the other restaurant is its own self-contained business called the Blue Porch.
They'll be open at different times. So Morning Bell will be brunch and Blue Porch will be more afternoon dinner.
Is it the same owners that have this?
I don't think so. Didn't sound like it.
In a kitchen?
Sharing a kitchen, but they'll have their own separate bathroom areas,
Yeah.
seating areas, all that. There'll be a wall between them.
They have to get plans then to put another bathroom in, because right now there isn't.
Yep, that's in their permit
Oh, okay.
that they just turned in.
They're putting in new bathrooms, new seating, new dividing walls, everything, but they're sharing a kitchen.
Are they sharing a liquor license
The
too?
kitchen runs across the back. I don't know where they're gonna sneak in a bathroom.
That's a joke. That's a joke.
Just to clarify though, would that be something that would come in front of planning commission? No, right?
The use of the building is not changing. They are just segmenting inside and,
Okay.
yeah, first time they just submitted it. Of course, it went permitting to our office and our office is like, this is 2 restaurants and it came back to us and we are like,
The first time they submitted it, it just said white box. We're like, why are you separating it for a white box? What would you eventually put in there, like a gift shop or something? And that's when they decided to come back and say, no, it's gonna be 2 restaurants.
So the signage is gonna be interesting.
Yeah, they haven't submitted anything for signs yet.
yeah, the sign is going to be interesting because
Yes.
they'll both have to share the sign. Yes, very
They
interesting.
haven't made it past the building
Eyes.
permit portion yet.
And was there something as far as the liquor license is concerned? Is that carried with the building or is the
No.
original owners or?
Bell is gonna serve alcohol. I'm not familiar with the other restaurant, but I know Morning Bell does serve alcohol.
Change their color, will they be coming in front of planning commission?
Out of the building changes, you guys will see them.
I already told them they could do it white. What are they gonna do with the blue section?
I don't know, I've seen blue happen.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else?
I don't know who decides who.
No,
who owns
I don't
what
have
groceries.
anything further.
Is anything else? Any other comments you would like to make?
Adjourn.
We have a,
Support.
and a support. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. 7:14.